Hi everyone, I'm Anita Johnson and I'm at the Tinkerage, and it's this week's virtual Tinkerage session, and I thought this week we might go through some of the hand tools that we have here at the Tinkerage so that when you're able to come, you know how to use them. Okay, well I'm going to show you some of the hand tools that we have here in the Tinkerage and a little bit about how to use them, and also call people up. Your uncle, your auntie, they would know how to use some of these tools because people actually did have knowledge of fixing things, and we need to regain that knowledge. So I will just, these are just quite simple basic hand tools that you probably have in your own garage or shed. So these are two different types of saws. One is for wood and one is for metal. So the hacksaw comes with a blade that you can replace, and most of them are similar in design. So you undo the little wing and it just slides on and off. When you're replacing the blade, you want to make sure that the teeth, the tiny little teeth, are facing forward, otherwise you'll be cutting backwards. And that also, the wood saw that I have, the tenon saw, its teeth also face forward. And this type of saw, these types of saws where the teeth face forward, it's best if you use them with that thought in mind, because the forward action of when you're cutting is where you should be putting your force, not like that. And the backward motion is quite gentle, barely touching the surface, because otherwise you will blunt your teeth of your saw. So it's just forward, back, like that. So this one is for metal, and you can get them in different numbers, and the TPI is teeth per inch. So that will tell you that you have, the higher the number, the more teeth per inch you have, and the higher the number is used for cutting softer metals and for thinner metals, because you want as many teeth as possible in contact with the surface that you're cutting. And that also tells you a little bit about the angle which you should cut something at. So for example, if we're cutting a piece of metal pipe or shape that's irregular, then those teeth should be in as much as impossible with the surface, as many teeth as possible in contact with the surface. And as you cut, you don't just continue down, but you turn the object around so that your teeth are in contact with the surface. Yeah, so that's the hacksaw. And this is a tenon saw. Tenon saws are really useful for or a mitre saw, it also gets called. Really useful for cutting angles and keeping them straight. So yeah, if you want to cut a 45-degree angle on something, if you're making a frame for something, then this is your perfect saw for that. Same action. So if you're using the tenon saw, it's a force is forward and then back, but quite often you need to do a couple of little ones coming backwards to make a groove for the saw to fit in when you're cutting. Yeah, so that's a little bit about the hand saws that we have here. We also have a lot of power saws, but I will talk about that in another session. We have power circular saws and band saws, and yeah, which are more for different types of jobs. So this is a different type of saw. It's a coping saw, and it's useful for cutting holes in the middle of something, because the blade is quite thin and it will fit through a hole that you drill into something and go back together again. So the blade actually pops in and out, and you loosen the handle, loosen the tension, and then by pushing against your bench you can remove the blade. Yeah, and these blades, when they fit back into your coping saw, blade teeth should be facing down this time, because in using the saw, you put your force in the downward motion. So to replace the blade, you just do the reverse. So push in, make sure it's straight. And it's got a little groove at the top that it should sit in, and then tighten the handle. And just make sure that your blade is straight, otherwise you'll put undue tension on the blade and it will snap. They do snap from time to time, so yeah, so that's a coping saw. And in using it, you use a downward force like that. That's why the teeth need to be facing downwards. We'll move on to some hammers. So I don't have a claw hammer here, but you're very familiar with a claw hammer. It's what everyone pictures in their head when they talk about a hammer. But there are very different types of hammers for all different purposes. And last week in the virtual Tinkerage, we took apart a chair, and we used a rubber mallet, rubber hammer for that purpose, so as not to bruise the wood. And I've also got a point hammer here. So this one's really useful for putting in little tacks, because you're usually holding the little nail with your thumb and forefinger, and it will fit just really nicely in there. This one is a ball peen hammer, and it gets used for shaping metal, particularly this end, which will turn the metal into a curve at the edge. You might also find some of these strange things in your shed. And this is also one. These are vice grips or monkey grips. Lots of people call them monkey grips. And they come in all shapes and sizes, but they're very useful for clamping two pieces of sheet metal together. Most often we're doing that if we want to rivet those two pieces of metal together. And in using the vice grips or the monkey grips, will bring those two surfaces really close to each other, and when you make a rivet, that's very important because it makes a strong join then. And these tools, they have a little turning part at the base, and this, as you can see, closes and opens the teeth. And when you clamp two pieces of metal together, so if I have these two pieces, you want to bring the teeth fairly close but not tight, because it's the pressure of these handles closing that creates the closure. So just keep turning the handle until you can feel that there's a resistance, and then they clamp. And then these two things are pretty solid, they don't come apart. And then you can sit it somewhere. You can also like drill into it, make a rivet, or if you're soldering it, or not soldering, but welding these two things together, then those, yeah, the monkey grips are really useful. They're like having a third hand almost. Also useful for gluing, like, yeah. So, oh, and release is this little wing part down the bottom. So you just pull that up again and it comes apart. So, monkey grips, vice grips. You might also find these things in your shed, and these are very useful for pulling out nails. They have a really curvy face to them, so that you do a rocking motion in pulling out the nail or tack. You might find some of these in your shed. These are tin snips. Tin snips also come in different sizes, shapes, and also curves. Some of them, if their teeth are curving off to one side, then that is the direction that that tool is designed to cut, and it's not very successful trying to make it cut a straight line because it is designed to curve off to the left. So yeah, so these ones are straight. Moving along, you'll be familiar with screwdrivers. So it's good to have a selection of screwdrivers, different sizes, but also you want a flat ones and Phillips head ones for different types of screws. And we also have some spade bits. So you would be familiar with drill bits, but these are spade bits, and they will actually make quite a large hole in something, useful for furniture making where you're inserting a chair leg or something like that. We also have files and rasps, different shapes, and chisels, different types of chisels. So I thought I might show you also a little bit about how to what I know about sharpening chisels. I think sharpening things is a science myself, but I'll show you a little bit about what I know. And this is a sharpening stone which I will use with the chisels, and a little bit of oil for this. This is a carving mallet. So you might have this is also a type of hammer, and it gets used with a chisel. And it sits like this because if it sits like this on the table, it tends to roll off, which is how this one got broken. So every time you use a mallet like that, it should go back onto the table like that. So we have a range of chisels here at the Tinkerage too, and the chisels are important to keep sharp and also to keep the top edge of the blade as level as possible. And as I was explaining before, we use a chisel mallet for tapping the chisel. It's a good idea to keep the rust of them as well. I'm looking at these ones and they need a little bit of a love. Just a bit of emery paper and a bit of oil to keep them nice. But when I'm trying to sharpen them, and I'm not an expert on sharpening, but I use the sharpening stone, a little bit of sharpening fluid, and then the chamfered bit down to the stone, and I put my finger there because the angle has got to be maintained at the right angle, and I make a little 8. And as I'm doing that, I just keep the same pressure on the top of my finger with the stone, and I can feel whether it's tipping or not. So I guess it's quite a sensitivity that you need, and awareness, need to focus that you're not rocking the blade and not tipping it forward because you'll actually blunt the blade. Yeah. So a little bit like that, a little bit of an 8, and then like that, just to get rid of any, if there's any burr on the back. Yeah, and that should keep your chisels really nice. That part is to be flat with that, yeah, and then I put my finger . You might have one of these in your shed. This is a rivet gun, also a rivet gun. Lots of people have this type. This one is a little bit different in that you can use both hands to create the pressure. This one is a one-handed tool. Some rivets. Yeah, so these tiny little things, and they fit in the end there. And then you press the handles to make your rivet, which I'll show later on. And we have the special drill bits for the rivets as well. Particular drill bits, drill and a driver. And yeah, so the drill and the driver are quite similar, but they're geared differently. So this drill and many drills also have usually lots of numbers around the front, and these are mistakenly thought to do with speed. They're not to do with speed, they're actually to do with force, with torque of the drill. So when you're drilling through something that is fragile, or you want to be more gentle with what you're drilling through, then you want to have the numbers down low, and vice versa. When you're drilling through a hard material, you want to have them up high. So this means that this drill is now in hammer mode, which you would use for drilling into masonry or something like that, because it has a hammer action as well as the drilling. It also has a directional shift here. So this little button at the side is how you change the rotation of the mechanism at the front. So if your drill bit does get stuck in something, you can switch this little switch and then it will reverse out again. It also can change its battery like this, just for sliding. So this drill has a keyless chuck, which means it doesn't have a little gadget that turns the chuck. And just turn it with your hand and you can feel it loosening, and that allows you to change the drill bit. And when you're putting it back in again, if you listen, it will make a click. And the driver is an automatic way of putting a screw in. So it's like a screwdriver, but it's electric, I guess. And it has little bits that slide into the front of it that are particularly designed for different types of screws. And this one's for a small Phillips head screw, like this one. It has a mechanism at the front, this particular type, where you pull forward to slide the bits in and out. It's like a little magnet at the front. So this tool also has a directional change button, which is just here. So, and on both sides. So you push it and it will turn anti-clockwise, which is reverse. And then if I push it in again, it will go clockwise, which is going forwards, pushing the screw into the wood.